Trying to get from one place to another is extremely difficult. Welcome to the first of our so-called academic panels. Although there she is. This morning our topic is getting the damn thing made. The thing I guess we're talking about is a feature-length motion picture. We have a number of filmmakers with us on the panel this morning. Some who've worked within the Hollywood system, some who've worked in the independent arena. And we're just going to talk a little bit about the problems that they've encountered or are encountering or anticipate encountering in getting their films made. I think rather than me introduce them, I think we'll just go down the line and have each of them introduce themselves, tell you what film they're with here, and if they've got like a log line on how they managed to get their film made, maybe they can tell us about that. We'll start with Elvis Mitchell, who doesn't have a film here, but he is a critic. He was at the very first Ebertfest, and we're happy to have him back at the 12th Ebertfest. In the interim, he was a film critic for places like the New York Times, and he had a short stint as a studio executive, so he's the type of guy that knows how to say no to a filmmaker.
You silver-tongued charmer, you.
So Elvis, anything else you want to say to the folks?
I feel like I'm here to get a matching grant for the panel. No, that's about it.
Okay. Michael?
I'm here with the movie The New Age screening today. I made it too many years ago, so I don't want to count. And I think I was able to get it made because there was a time in American independent cinema when you could get that movie made. I just want to say one thing, that the name of this panel, how to get the damn thing made, I want to avoid thinking of any of my work either as damn or as a thing. One tries to keep it sacred, at least, to keep it alive. Thank you.
Hello. I just want to say I thought it started at 9:45. My apologies. My name is Jennifer Burns. My film is Vincent, A Life in Color, screening Saturday, the 24th. And this is my first film. And I was able to make it because I had 5 credit cards. And I'm dumb.
Charlie?
My name is Charlie Kaufman. My movie is Synecdoche, New York, and I don't know. It was originally going to be made by Sony, and Spike Jonze was going to direct it, and after it was decided that I was going to direct it, and then they got the script, they no longer wanted to make it. So they put it in turnaround, which was very nice of them, really, because they could have held on to it, and they didn't. And then it was financed by a company called Kimmel something, Sidney Kimmel something, and but without distribution. And kind of as we're making the movie, all of the sort of specialty distributors kind of fell away, and so we had a hard time finding distribution, and we finally did. And I don't think we would now. I think we were at the sort of tail end of that period.
My name is James Mottern. I kind of forgot what the question is now.
What's your movie and how did you manage to get it made?
How I managed to get it made. James Mottern, I made a film called Trucker. And I'm still trying to figure out how I got it made, actually. But it was sort of there was a time in American cinema when there were a lot of people who had a lot of extra money around, and they had they wanted to invest in films, and so if you could convince them or trick them, as I like to think of it, into giving you their money, and that's what they did for Trucker.
My name is Isaac Chung, and the film I made is called Munyurangabo, the one that was shot in Rwanda. I guess I just worked with the theory of knowing that in a production you have to pay for things in a step-by-step way, and we didn't have enough money to make the entire film, but just decided to start anyway, and somehow scraped all the money together, and kept the budget very low. So I think that's how we made it.
I'm Jenny Lund. I'm also with the film Munyurangabo, and in the interest of full disclosure, you should know I generally live at the poverty level, so I'm not. But filmmaking, I think, especially at a lower independent level, it's necessary to have a good network. Network of friends and peers that kind of support you and encourage you and keep you from getting discouraged, because it's a long process.
My name is Sam Anderson. I'm also with the film Munyurangabo. We just put it together piece by piece. Even the way we shot it, it was kind of written piece by piece, and I think we realized in making it just how much you have to just be very quick on your feet and be able to just respond to whatever situations come up. And it was a learning process in that, but I think that's something that was very important.
Nobody sounds happy.
It's 9:30.
Michael?
I'm happy, just not about this.
I overheard a conversation, Michael, you were involved in last night about whether or not you would have been able to make this film today. And your answer was probably not, right?
Right, well, we're just in this really strange, primitive moment in American culture in which we keep going back to origin myths of half human, half mechanical monsters. And it's a long discussion, but this is not a time, well, at least I think the most interesting work being done in the culture right now in reflecting on the culture, which is, I think what most of us here try to do, is on television rather than in cinema. Again, it's a long discussion, but we're in a period in which the studios have discovered that really what works is what you see working, which is very big, high concept comic book movies, with the occasional really great, vulgar, hysterical, druggy comedy. And the programmer, the drama, Universal, a couple of years ago, about a year and a half ago, put 85 movies into Turnaround, which was all of their dramas. They bought 6 spec scripts that year and didn't shoot a single one. And so I don't think, nothing lasts forever, and eventually the Marvel catalog will have been exhausted. And
There are graphic novels being produced.
don't tell Hollywood.
Can I just say something about the Marvel catalog? I'm making up, for something I'm doing, I'm looking to make up a fake superhero. And it's impossible to come up with any combination of words and look in their catalog and not find that it's a pre-existing superhero by Marvel. It's true. So the catalog's not going to end anytime soon.
So what is being done too is, I think that there was a movie called Lemony Snicket, where it was actually created by a studio or by a production company to be a movie, but it was produced as a book first, or some kind of graphic book. Is that right? And so then it became
a series of books,
film. So there are a lot of ideas that are generated where there'll be one or two of a graphic novel, and then everyone will think it's a graphic novel that exists, when in fact it was just created in order to make a film from it.
I mean, they're also mining video games, as well as comic books and novels.
But remember, Love Story was the first time that happened. Love Story is originally a script, and it was published as a novel first. That's why it's such an incredibly small book. It was really cynically sort of done. and it's turned into a book first, and then this is the same publishing company is owned by Paramount, and then it turned into a movie to create this kind of groundswell.
Yeah. I mean, the studios are all about marketing, and as we've seen, they'll do anything to mine as much money from a motion picture as possible. Before we go any further, the term turnaround has been used a couple times here. Maybe somebody could explain, just give us a definition of turnaround.
They pay you to write a script. They own it. They decide not to make it. After 3 or 4 years, you know they're not going to make it. They give you the right to set it up at another studio, so long as if the other studio decides to make the movie, you have to pay back everything they gave you, plus prohibitive interest.
It's more like that to pay, you have to pay them back what they claim they spent on the film.
Right, you discover what they,
Yeah.
you discover what somebody's overhead is.
They are the studios, the major studios, Paramount, Warner Brothers, Fox, people like that.
I also just want to say one thing that I don't want to sound like, I mean, I hope as I'm complaining, I don't sound like I'm complaining. And that there's that line in Godfather 2, which I think has to be the mantra of anybody working on the system, which is when Lee Strasberg says to Al Pacino, Michael, this is the life we've chosen. You know going into this what it is, and it's just a series of realities you have to deal with.
Yeah.
You do go into it knowing what it is, but as it's happening, you can't believe it's true.
Right.
I'm not even trying to be funny, it's really true.
Right. Well, that's what
kind of breaks your heart every day as you kind of go through it. You're like, this really.
But also, once you get into it, you can't get out of it. There's an addictive quality to it, I think.
No matter how much your wife pleads you, it's true. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about, I mean, we sort of skirted about, talk a little bit about the studio system, that way of making movies. The other way is independent cinema, where you go out and find your own money or use your own credit cards to make basically low budget motion pictures, although some larger budget pictures are also made with independent finance. So I think why don't you talk, you folks talk a little bit about did you have a business plan for this, for your motion picture? Did you know?
So I guess the way it started out was that I bought this camera off of eBay, this 16mm camera, and then I have an uncle who offered to donate film to me, and I knew I had to shoot on film because I'm shooting in Rwanda where the electricity is not very good, and also I don't have any lighting equipment, and I think film holds up better without a lot of lighting. So once we just got to Rwanda and started shooting, that was all done with my money, except for, I should say my wife and my money, because she would correct me if she were here. And then after that, it wasn't too expensive. I mean, I put the film together on one of the old editing machines, the Steenbecks, so we saved a lot of money. And then we actually got into the Cannes Festival in 2007, and once that happened, it was much easier to start fundraising, because we actually used that as an incentive to people if they'd like to contribute to us to finish the film, because I think post-production ended up costing the most. That we would invite them to come to Cannes with us and walk the carpet and do all that stuff, and that ended up working out. Just finding wealthy relatives and friends to contribute a little bit here and there. So that was really the business plan that we used. And I don't know if you guys want to add anything.
Well, I think, it was also kind of a one-time thing for us, because this being, the first feature film that we had all worked on, we went into it knowing that we may not actually come out of this process with a finished film. There was just enough uncertainty there where we said, well, we're doing this for, you know, for the experience, and we have no idea how good the film is going to be when it comes out. We have no idea if it's going to go anywhere. I think now, having that behind us, we can't go into another film with that attitude, but that's kind of the attitude that we had at the beginning.
And your second film is premiering in Tribeca this weekend? Is that
Oh,
correct?
yeah, that's right.
Tomorrow, yeah.
Yeah, lucky luck.
So you're leaving to go there from here. And did you have any was it easier to get the second film financed?
Yeah, it was definitely easier, and yeah, worked more with foreign financing to do it. I think one of the things we learned in the second film is that for Americans it's much more difficult than people in international communities, because internationally people can rely on more grants or you know, organizations like Arte to help finance films, but a lot of these grants are set up to combat American cinema. So for people like us who are American directors, it's very difficult to try to find co-productions to get films made. I mean, we lucked out because we just found a private financier who was willing to finance, and the film was, you know, we shot it for around $350,000, so it wasn't too much. And going forward with the next film, we're basically doing the same thing. It's going to be a very low budget film and shooting this fall. And I think that's kind of the solution that I've thought of for now. Is I'd like to have a lot of freedom in the types of films I make. And in doing that, that means that I have to give up the freedom of using lots of equipment or, you know, doing things in a very big budgeted way, and instead try to just make very low budget films in which I can find financing, and it's not as integral to try to get the money back from the production. And to me, you know, it's working okay now, and maybe something I'll continue, because the freedom is quite nice to not be tied to whoever's giving the money to deliver a product. You know.
That's where when you say the movie business, it's this idea that it's not really a business in a sense. Like, you go into it thinking that it is a business, that people understand it in that way, but in a certain sense, what it's become in independent film especially is sort of the good graces of people who are kind of willing to not make their money back, you know, and that's where it's a little bit different, because there are many fewer theaters that will run independent films that don't have big stars in them, and the cost of advertising them and promoting them is much more exorbitant than it was even, you know, 5 years ago. And so you do see this divide where there are people who will then go make a movie that really should cost $1 million, let's say, and they make it for $100,000 with nothing, and nobody gets paid anything, and that's the movie they want to go make. And then the studios then go make the $50 million or the $30 million or the $20 million comedy. And so there is a great divide now between studio stuff and independent stuff. It's vast, and getting bigger too.
Elvis, maybe could you talk a little bit about the state of independent film distribution in this country today, or in the world?
It's sad because so many indie companies have gone out of business. I mean, there's a big one last year that closed up. I bought a movie that just got released last month called Brooklyn's Finest. This company, Senator, bought it out of Sundance, and between the time they bought it and the deal was announced, the company went out of business. Because what's happened is the indie film world is kind of like the lottery, and suddenly when everybody started to win, people started to make more and more and try to sell more and more of them, and they basically treat them as if it was a studio system where you could make a little movie and make a lot of money back, rather than to value these films as these specific little kinds of movies. And then what really was both a boon and a real liability was the success of Bowling for Columbine, which is a movie that was bought at the Cannes Film Festival for $3 million. Most documentaries don't even gross $3 million, and $3 million was spent for that. So then, when that movie was bought for that kind of money, it became such a huge success, it made $30 million back. Then everybody started saying, well, we can release documentaries and they'll make lots of money, and it's really a fluke when any film has that kind of success. And the unfortunate thing about now all these little indie places haven't gone out of business is that There's so many great films out there, and I was just talking to somebody about this at another festival. There are more screens in this country than ever before. There are 5 times more screens in this country now than there were even in 1989. And what's probably going to have to happen for indie filmmakers, and they're starting to do this now, is they have to go out and four-wall, which is to go to a theater and rent it out and book the movie themselves. I mean, that's a way to take it around to audiences. Audiences are generally thrilled to meet the filmmaker. Filmmakers like talking to the audiences. The unfortunate thing about that is sometimes you have a hard time getting the money from the theaters.
Yeah, and well, I mean, the whole model has changed because most of the specialty or independent distribution companies in the past 2 or 3 years have shut their doors. So what Elvis is talking about, four-walling, taking your picture from city to city, town to town, showing it, trying to create an event in a particular locale so people will come to see it, then trying to get the theater to give you the money. Then, I mean, you become a roadshow with your film.
But there's a precedent for that. Melvin Van Peebles did it with Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song. If anybody remembers In Search of Historic Jesus, those some classic movies from the 70s, those are all four-wall. Grizzly Adams. I mean, there's
Billy Jack, I think, was...
No, that was Warner Brothers.
I thought those were originally four-wall and then...
He forced the studio, he sort of took it back from them, and then, but it still is a studio film.
Okay.
But it's kind of funny, all these things we think of as being new, independent things, there's a tradition of them. And it's probably, it forces filmmakers, unfortunately, I want to hear everybody talk about this, to be entrepreneurial. When I think you lose so much energy getting the film made, how much energy do you have left to take a film out?
Yeah, I mean, the variation on that question is, do you like the idea of spending 2 more years with your film after you finished making it? I mean, it used to be you made a film, distributed, you went on to make your next film. Now, filmmakers more and more are having to travel with their films, having to spend their own money to do that. How do the filmmakers feel about this new model?
Well, what you're describing is a little bit like what's happened in the music industry, which is that musicians now have to tour to make a living because the record sales have dropped and music royalties have dropped. But you know, you can theoretically, as a musician, you can play club dates around. You can go around the country in a van and play club dates and scrape money together. But you can't drive around the country with a film in the trunk and and show it every night. The model doesn't work. There's no way to make any.
You can't, to use the infamous word, it's hard to monetize that type of enterprise. Yeah, Jennifer?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that four-walling is definitely something that people turn to, but it's not your only alternative. Self-distribution has really become a big thing for at least filmmakers at my meager level. And there are theater bookers, there are booking agents that you can go through, and so you don't have to actually rent out the space, much cheaper. And there are also companies that, in addition to booking the theaters for you, will do some kind of low-level marketing and publicity for you and reach out to the critics in those towns. And so it has actually become, at least for micro-budgeted films, it is possible to monetize that kind of. The social networking, that's the key. I mean, I'm not good at this, but I have to get good at this if I want to make my money back. But if you create a presence online with Facebook and Twitter and your website and you blog and all of these things that take time away from writing your next screenplay, you build up these communities and you find out where they are in the country, and then you specifically target those communities to take your film to, and you bring your DVDs with you and you sell them after the screening. And I don't understand why, but people, after paying $10 to watch a movie, will then go give you $20 for your DVD. I don't understand it, but they do it, and so there is hope. Hope is alive.
But when you think of making back, say, $350,000 in that particular manner, that's not easy to do.
No, you're right.
So, but also just the idea of having to spend that extra time doing this sort of thing.
Well, I mean, if you look at sort of like Cassavetes as a model, he'd probably say, why wouldn't you? Why would you not do it until the bitter end, until you were completely broke and destitute, and everyone didn't want to listen to you anymore. You know, I mean, but it is sort of that way with the. I mean, I can only speak to my film. I really don't know, but you know, I think as a filmmaker, you are presented with this idea that you know you're a product of your time too, and so you do see that at Sundance for the past decade. You know, you see these big sales and. You know, that's always the first thing that's reported out at Sundance. It's not like, what's the greatest film that was there? What is, you know, who's the next Cassavetes or whatever? It's always like, what did what sell for? Something sold for $10 million or whatever. So that's the mindset you get into. And especially when you see the structure of Hollywood and then of really film in a way, it's very much controlled by agents. And not even production people, but really it's presented that you deserve to have a certain amount of money for your film. You deserve to have a certain amount of money being paid for your screenplay, and if you don't get that, then it wasn't, you're not valued, or the film wasn't good, or it can't be distributed, or whatever it was. And so it really becomes about how much it would sell for or not sell for. But what you've seen now is that agents can't command that kind of money. The money does not exist in that way, and still they try to control what goes through the pipeline. I'm using agents, but it's more of a mentality, it's more of a sensibility. And so they can't command these prices, and so what you see then is that these distributors don't pay as much. There aren't really as many out there. But what you find, at least when doing my film, is that a lot of these distributors now and the agents and the people that kind of have run that show for so long are really almost like paper tigers. And when you really see, well, how much money are you going to spend for the advertising? How much are you going to spend, you know, to promote it? What you find is that they'll hire a publicist now. They'll put some money into a limited release, maybe in New York and Los Angeles and Chicago and maybe 5 other cities, and see how it plays. If it doesn't play, you know, put money behind it. If it doesn't play, they'll pull it, or they'll, you know, kind of just let it go. And so, you know, unless they're really willing. And so in that sense, then you see that these smaller companies would do just exactly what you would do almost, but they have to cover their overhead in a way that you don't. And so with Trucker, what I realized is like, well, shit, I could have done this myself in a way, you know, especially with the size of the company that I was dealing with. And then what you find too is that all these movies that were independent films that maybe a few years ago you would have had some stars that maybe were from television, or some interesting stage actors, or an ensemble that was really kind of, I mean, it's not always been this way, but is now, as an independent person, you're really gunning for big stars in your independent movie. And you can't offer them that much money. The only thing you can offer them is some sort of pedigree, or the sense that they'll be able to do something that they haven't done before. I mean, that's not changed, but the stakes for that are much higher. To get Jennifer Aniston into your independent, or, you know, Tom Cruise into your independent, like it's at that level. And so, you know, either that's the way that you can get your film made, if it's something a little off, and so it just becomes more and more difficult. But just to speak in terms of, I know I've been talking a long time, but sorry about that, but just this sort of decentralization of distribution then is that you realize that to get your film into a theater is really only for the promotion of it. There's no money, I mean, there was never a ton of money to be made in that. And then you have to try to then see how you can get on iTunes, you know, not even into Blockbuster Video, because you're probably not going to get any play there, but like into Redbox or the downloads, and to just get it disseminated broadly, nickels and dimes from many different outlets. That's the only way to make your money back, and I think that's sort of decentralization of it too.
I think filmmakers is always gets the short end of the stick when it comes to dividing up the spoils. A friend of ours made a documentary that they sold in rough cut to HBO. Then the film got into Sundance, and HBO spent more on the promotion at Sundance than they gave the filmmakers for the film. And that's not an unusual story. I don't know. I don't know what the answer to this is. There are a lot of people trying to figure it out. Let's move back a little bit though to to the studio system.
Can I just say one more thing about that before? I mean, I know I was talking, I won't talk so much, but I think it's somehow it seems negative, like, oh, you know, that's just a terrible thing. But in a way, as a filmmaker, you have been bred in this way to think like, well, someone else is going to take care of your business for you because you're paying them, right? They bought it, they're going to go do it, and that's what they're supposed to do. So you have this idea that you can let it go and it will be in good hands the way it was in your hand, what you would assume would be. You know, you think everyone's kind of in it together, but it's kind of good to wake up to the fact that you've been abandoned. You know, that you're on your own. It's like you're adrift, and you know you're either going to sink or swim. You know, so I think it's positive because it makes you, when you go do it, it makes you believe it. And if you didn't believe it before, you either have to really believe it or not at all. And so you have to you really do have to push yourself mentally, and I don't know about artistically, but as far as like a filmmaker, all the way to the end, to the bitter end, and in a way I think it makes you sort of, you know, it's sort of like in adversity, you know, you feel like, well, the studios have this idea about how they want things to run, and so they're not going to let you do this, they're not going to let you do that, and in a way, because you have to fight harder, it's almost like I think that they'll create monsters in a certain way, that people that just are doing it themselves or have to fight harder, that eventually it's sort of like any kind of, you know, revolution, and I don't mean that in like a military way, I mean like the literal way, is that then that something will change, something will happen that's really good out of it, I think. I don't think it's like totally negative. It's just right now it's like, you know, everybody's got to put food on the table and it's not happening, so.
Yeah, well, it's difficult. But Michael, why don't you tell us about Michael wrote a movie called The Player, which has told us a little bit about the workings of Hollywood. How's Hollywood today? How are the studios doing? And what are they looking for? Beyond what you said earlier.
You know, The Player was based on a novel, and then a few years ago I wrote The Return of the Player, and the opening line is Griffin Mill was broke, he was down to his last $6 million. And it was about how my murderous studio executive has looked around the system, sees that it's not what it was when he signed on for it. He had always wanted to be on the board, you know, at the highest executive level, where the real money is made, and he knows that he's frozen at a certain level in production. He's never going to do better than that. So the book is about how he gets out of Hollywood. The producer I worked with on The Player, the late David Brown, who died this year at 92 or 93, and had been working in the studio system long enough so that he was one of the people responsible for greenlighting Cleopatra at Fox. Said that Hollywood it's always the same. He said it never changes. So, and I believed him. So I think that it's still hard. The studios are desperate, but you know, right now, every 40 years, Jeffrey Katzenberg, who heads DreamWorks Animation, said that 3D was going to save the studios, but would only save the studios if the studios were making really high quality 3D. And he said that the success of some of the cartoons, and obviously Avatar proved, and Alice in Wonderland proved that people will pay a premium to see a movie in 3D. He said, but if the studios continue to backward engineer movies like Clash of the Titans, and make 3D out of something that was shot in 2D, that the audience will get tired, will not trust the 3D process, get bored with it. He said that could be a disaster for the studios because the DVD market has collapsed, the video market, revenue streams that guaranteed profit are gone now, and so studios are nervous. But some movies have been making a ton of money. There's a certain way in which the formula which they're sticking to seems to be working.
And are they still on the prowl for new talent among
Always,
independent
always,
filmmakers?
always, always.
Because
That never changed. Sure.
and then they take someone who's made a really good small film and give them a $100 million budget and hope they're going to make a good film.
Well, it's not. I mean, sometimes, or somebody's come out of video, or somebody's come out of commercials. Film studies at a brilliant film and film school. They're always looking for. They're always.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically a colonial and imperial power. They just go out and.
You're talking about independent film, and James brought this up about the big sales. And when you think about that, almost all those movies that sold for a lot of money at Sundance never make any money, or they barely get released. The first time I went to Sundance, a movie sold for $10 million. It was 99. I was in a jury. I thought, this is awful. Who does it look like? Well, something looked before. A lot of these Sundance comedies feel to me like these TV pilots, and this one felt like one. It was about a couple of convicts on a run who pretend to be gay beauty contest consultants, and it was really awful. It was really terrible, and it sold for $10 million. And a year later, it came out in 2 cities. Basically, it was thrown away. But money was just being thrown willy-nilly because the belief that eventually you would find the next Pulp Fiction or the next sexualized videotape. So the cycle just got too big. And so then, because it was basically fool's gold, that cycle collapsed. And instead of just somebody saying, well, we keep to the model of basically playing this out in a few theaters, just trying to get the money back and get the movies out there, then there's a way, because people do want to see movies. That's why you guys are all here. That's why you guys come to this festival. It's why I love going to film festivals, because there's real excitement about new films and about meeting filmmakers. And it's this weird thing that seems to elude people at studios. I think it's partially because, and I learned this during my brief time as an executive, they don't go to the movies. I know it sounds like a dumb thing, but they don't. I mean, maybe so much of their time is spent trying to deal with the politics of movies that they don't have a taste for it. I don't know, but they don't go.
I think it is true that. Well, I think one of the things that's hurt the movies has, I don't know if you know that when the Oscars are, when films are in contention for the Oscars, the studios think they've got a shot. They send out, this is a practice I've been doing for about at least 10, 12 years, or more. They send out, 15. They send out videos of the movies they're promoting to the members of the Academy or the members of the Guild. So, you feel like you win the lottery. You get 40 or 50 DVDs by December. Between September and December, one year they even sent out a DVD player in case you didn't get the message. And this skews the Oscars away from spectacle, commercial movies, things that actually make money, to films that are more fun to watch at home. It's something that started with a cable channel called the Z Channel in Los Angeles in the mid-1980s, when Annie Hall was played in heavy rotation on this channel, and that's apparently the reason it won Best Picture, that it was because it gave a chance for everybody to see it. And I think that because people wait for that video, particularly in the movies that start coming out in the summer, it's bad for the movies. Oh, it's bad. It does something, sets up expectations. I'm gonna cut myself off right now because I'm not exactly sure where my thought is going, but I know it's not good.
I want to ask Charlie, because the kind of stuff you do, a lot of what you do in the studio system is thrilling to me. I mean, it's not like anything else. It's idiosyncratic. It's its own thing. You were saying before that you felt it was the end of that era. Why do you think that was?
Well, I mean, I think because of what I said before, is that we had such a hard time finding a distributor for it. And I think that's scared, for example, Kimmel, who paid for it. I think, they got so scared off by a series of movies that they made that didn't make any money, that they completely changed their agenda as a film company, which a lot of them do. I mean, I think a lot of them. I think that everybody's doing this kind of thing where, you know, the two gay hairdresser things now, and they're calling that independent films. That's what everyone's doing. You know, Focus is doing it. Everybody's doing it. So I think that's why I became anxious, because I saw what happened to us, and I saw that we couldn't sell it.
I just wondered too, because you were getting stuff made in the studio system before that. I mean, and when Spike Jones walked away from Synecdoche, suddenly the studio didn't want to make it anymore. Is that what happened? Or?
Well, no, that's my interpretation of the series of events. I think the script was eccentric, and I think that they would have been more likely to make it had they had a tested director at the helm, you know. And when I was doing it, I think it was a combination of things that made it scary to them. But I mean, I think it was also a different time already. I think that Sony at that time was not really in the business of making this type of movie, whereas where they made adaptation, you know, Amy Pascal, who runs Sony at the time, said to us, okay, if you make the movie for this amount of money, I'll leave you alone. If you need more money, I can't leave you alone. And so we made the movie for the amount of money where she would leave us alone, and she was true to that. I mean, she was, you know, it was great. They left us alone to make that movie. But that's not the type of movie they make anymore, you know. Even though I think they really liked the movie, and they really liked us, and they really liked making it, it's not what they do anymore. And she said as much to me, you know, because this movie that I'm writing now is for her. And I don't know if she's going to want to make it when I turn it in. You know, I mean, I'm doubtful.
Are you going to direct that as well?
I mean, yeah. I mean, it's my intention to direct it, and if it's made there, I will. But I mean, who knows what's going to happen? It might go into turnaround, and then I'm going to be in the same sort of situation I was last time.
But you're used to it. I mean, all of you are committed to making movies. Is that correct?
I'm not entirely committed anymore. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I have to say, I worry about it. I worry about thinking about, you know, I think the danger in the conversation that we're having, and I'm not in the same situation, so I can't speak to the idea of distributing myself and going on for 2 years, and, you know, all this stuff is not something I've ever done. But I also feel I like to be protected from it, because it's not what I do, and it's not what I want to do, and I don't really want to think about it when I'm writing, you know. Like, I don't want to think about who's going to be interested in this movie, or how am I going to get funding for it, because I think then that comes into the process of writing, which you know, if you start doing that, you start thinking like a studio executive. You start thinking about precedent. You start thinking about, well, you know, people like this movie, they went to see this movie, and so this is, and you're not doing this intentionally or even consciously necessarily, but I'm doing it, you know, and I don't want to do that. I want to, you know, be, you know, I read this thing that, I think Cocteau said. I just read it recently, and it, you know, obviously was said a long time ago, but it was very true, I thought. He said that, you know, movie making will become an art when what you need to make it is as cheap as pen and paper. And you know,
we're heading in that direction, obviously.
Well, but I think when you have to think about, oh God, I need $100,000, and that's very, very low level. I mean, you know.
Well, I think what you're talking about here, and I think you're lucky in this regard. I mean, I've produced a few movies, one big budget and a couple low budget films, and I always see the primary role of the producer is to insulate and protect the director, so the director can make the movie the director wants to make. We haven't talked much about the role of producers in the filmmaking process, but if you have a good producer, and I believe, Charlie, you have a good producer in Anthony Bregman, I mean, doesn't he insulate you a bit from that whole process? Or is that his role?
I mean, to a certain extent, but I was also a producer on Synecdoche, so
Oh, okay.
at one point when I complained about the lack of insulation, he said, well, you shouldn't be a producer, you know, on a movie. But I mean, I think the problems of the movie, you know, of making any movie are the problems that you have to deal with as a director. I mean, you have to deal with the limitations of your budget. You know, I mean, that they can't protect you from that. You only get a certain number of days to shoot the movie, and you know that. I mean, they can't lie to you and say you have more days. I mean, you have to figure out how to shoot it.
So Charlie, the director, has arguments with Charlie, the writer.
I don't. But I think, you know, as the director, you have to deal with the practical realities of the situation, even if you're not a producer, because you know what they are.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you know that you can't get a certain amount of funding if you don't have a certain level name actor. You know, I mean, how can you not know that?
But when you are writing the script, you try to keep those kinds of thoughts.
Well, the script I'm writing now is the first time that I'm writing with an eye towards directing it. I mean, when I wrote the last one, as I said, Spike was going to direct it, so I didn't think about it. And now that I've got a different experience, which I'm trying to kind of, a little bit, sort of remove myself from so I can do my work.
Why don't we open it up to a few questions from the audience? We have a microphone here in the middle of the aisle, and if you could just sort of line up, because we are actually streaming this live to Ebertfest.com and Roger's website and a couple of other places. So please ask your questions at the microphone.
Hey, I guess this question is I'm directing it to Elvis, but I'd like to hear what others have to say about it. It sounds almost like the theme of this panel should be getting the damn thing seen rather than made. I live in Atlanta. We've been now a year and a half in Atlanta without a film critic. The newspaper decided we didn't need one anymore. Got rid of Eleanor Ringo Gillespie, who is rather good.
And had been there for a long time.
And been there for a long time. And so now they just buy film criticism off the wire. And so we don't have that place to go to and see what's playing in our city and recommended by somebody that you know and trust in the city. And you know, Atlanta's not a little burg, it's a pretty big town. Fort Worth still have a film critic. You go on the internet is so fragmented these days in terms of finding a reliable source for what's going on.
You know what's happened is that the studios are giving up on newspapers because a TV ad gets them a bigger audience, and so they rather do that. And it's what happens though is I still feel like, for me, and I see this at film festivals, is that word of mouth is as important as anything else. And what newspapers do, what they did was they create discussion. You know, when I wrote in Fort Worth for 2 years, and I was in Detroit, and the Free Press no longer has a film critic there. You know, it's just shocking to me the newspapers think, and it's funny because they will always tell you that the sports section is where people go, and I can tell you for a fact, more people read the movie section than read the sports section of any newspaper, and if those sections generate more income. You go, my example, look at the Sunday New York Times, and the arts and leisure section. Look how full of ads that is. Real estate's gone down, all the other sections are diminished. That paper's still full of movie ads. People want to read newspapers, they want that criticism. Those are real champions, and one of the reasons we all come to Roger is that he's still that guy, and he shows that people want that relationship with critics. And it's heartbreaking to me that a place like Atlanta has decided that they'd rather have somebody writing about the Hawks or any other team than have somebody like Eleanor writing about movies and getting the word out.
So how do we find out these days? Recommendations from you?
I mean, I guess it's blogging, really, finally, but yeah, I'd like to hear the filmmakers talk about it.
I think that it seems to me that there's kind of a notion of irrelevancy of criticism, and you can sort of see it reflected in the fact that, you know, the movies that make enormous amounts of money are almost always rated like 30 on Rotten Tomatoes or Metacritic. You can see like the Rotten Tomato. So the studios don't care about it because it doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter if they're good. It matters if they can figure out a way to sell them to people and they can have a big opening weekend, and that's an enormous influx of cash and at the opening, and that kind of carries the movie if it's bad. So I think it's an unfortunate thing, but I think that no one cares about the quality of the movies anymore. They care about the hook.
Charlie, there used to be a time when film critics would keep somebody alive. I mean, in the gift bag, there's Roger's book on Martin Scorsese, and remember, nobody saw Mean Streets. It was the fact that it was so well reviewed that people wanted to bet on him, and studios took a chance. And now a bunch of good reviews don't get you anything. You know, if you, and I wonder, I'm sorry, I keep stepping in the way, but I just wonder for you guys, if the reviews have made a difference in terms of investors coming up to you and saying, well, I want to bet on your next movie because of the reviews you got, if that makes any difference.
No, but if you make a movie as exciting as Mean Streets, I mean, Mean Streets is not, Mean Streets is a rare movie.
Well, maybe that's
self-evident.
But still, there are great movies, and well, Sex, Lies, and Videotapes was one of those movies too. I mean, there's probably one of those movies, a movie like that every year.
Sex, Lies, and Videotape. Sex, Lies, and Videotape is an interesting case because it
It's financed by a video company.
yeah, but it's also you know, before Birth of a Nation, the movies were essentially a novelty item, poor person's entertainment, a kind of a gimmick. And then Birth of a Nation was made, and Louis B. Mayer, who was doing distribution in theater distribution in the Northeast, saw what money, you know, saw the money that was possible, and out of that grew what became the studio system. And I think that Sex Lives came along at a time that turned, in a way, was the birth of a nation of independent cinema. It made $100 and some odd million, and out of nowhere won the Cannes, you know, won the Palme d'Or at Cannes. He was the youngest director who ever got that. It was a sensation, and out of that, people said, well, there's a market for this thing. And now with the internet and video and cheap video cameras, I think we're still waiting for the birth of a nation of, or the Sex, Lies, and Videotape of the YouTube, which also makes money, which has to be monetized. So there's two things are required. One is somebody makes a movie for at a budget which is appropriate to the media, and that it really works. Like if Blair Witch had been made expressly for the internet, and they'd been able to figure out a way to make the hundreds of millions of dollars that they made off of it, that would have created an industry. And so there's the creation of an industry which is, or the recreation of an industry which is, I think, still lurking in the shadows, and that's a combination of technology and a way to make money, and a way to make money.
But it will happen.
Yeah.
At some point. Next question.
The cost is kept down, obviously, when you're making independence by using inexperienced or non-professional actors or actresses. If this is one of the things you've decided to do to keep the cost down, how do you go about selecting these people when, to a large extent, the fate of the movie depends upon them and they're inexperienced?
Well, there's a lot of talented people out there.
Yeah.
There's no end of talent.
Just look at the film You the Living last night. There was all those were non-actors in that film. But still,
I mean, if you have a casting call in New York, if you have a casting call in New York or in LA, and you're doing your job right, and you know it's painstaking, and it's not like everybody comes through the door as James Dean, but there's really limitless talent.
My other question is, you're all fairly young up there. And
Thank you.
You're welcome. And you start out, you're making some movies, they're getting some recognition or whatever. There must be a tremendous number of middle-aged, upper middle-aged people who have given up because they haven't gotten the recognition, and you look toward the future and see this happens. At what point or at what time do you see yourself just saying it's too much work, it's too much effort?
You kind of say it almost every day, in a way. I mean, it is, when you know, it's sort of so much of it is like waiting and making calls and waiting for a call and see who, you know, in the process of trying to, for instance, cast film now, you don't say, you know, someone says your movie's financed. Like right now I have 2 movies that are financed, right? But they're not really financed because there are the contingencies of who's going to be in it, and then the budget kind of goes up and down because of that. And then you kind of have to resign yourself, or resolve, I guess, is it how much you're willing to not make, you know, how much you're willing to kind of give up to do this, because, and it is that sort of thing where you're like, I mean, I used to do construction, you know, for a living at different times in my life, and it's great because at the end of the day, you know you've made $400, and you look at, you know, it's not incredible, but you're like, oh, I put a roof on today, or, you know, I had some fun, we, you know, screwed around, ate some donuts, whatever it was. You feel like you accomplished a day of something. Whereas sometimes when you're trying to make a film, you look back at 6 months and you're like, what was I doing? I know I was sitting in my computer looking at emails. I know I was like checking my voicemail. I know I was meeting with people. What was it? Because nothing seemed to happen, you know? And so there is, when you say that, I think that, I don't know if there is a breaking point, but I know that about a year ago I was talking to a producer who's not a friend of mine, but I was talking to a producer, and she said that she had friends who were producers, and producers are the first to go, you know, in this way, I think, thankfully, but is that she got back into real estate, and it's a well-known producer, you know, she was like, thank God I've got this happening because I wouldn't have anything else, you know. And so I think that there is like these dirty little secrets in Hollywood that really a lot of people just have very little happening, even though they go to meetings and they're filling up someone else's calendar. So I've often felt like I'm at the breaking point, you know, but then you kind of march on, you know. It's sort of like alcoholism, like you're like, I'll give it up tomorrow, but today I'm gonna get really fucked up. That's that feeling a little bit of making movies, I think.
This is the most depressing panel I've ever been. If I can drown myself in this right now. But, you know, it's like, I don't know whether it was Samuel Beckett or Michael Bay who said, I can't go on, I go on. You know, he just...
So we missed that.
I said, it was, you know, was it Samuel Beckett or Michael Bay who said, I can't go on, I go on.
Oh, okay.
Samuel Beckett.
Probably. Okay, next question.
Lee, you mentioned you captured in film for your first endeavor. Is film capture still around, or is it pretty much gone digital? And if it's gone digital capture, what type of equipment is being used? That's my first question. And secondly, when you pitch movies, do you pitch them to investors thinking that you are going to get a return on your money, investors, or is it just thank you very much and you get the reward of seeing your product?
Well, for the first question, I guess people who are working at my budget level, I think primarily shoot on digital. There are a number of camera systems like the Red camera that's becoming very popular, or other digital systems that are going to be coming out very soon. I've kind of stuck with film just because I really like the look of it, and I think you can actually shoot on film for not that much more than you would shooting on video if you're shooting on Super 16, for instance. So at least for me, I'm still stuck on doing this the film way. As for the second question, it's funny because I feel like a lot of this business is really just trying to scam people into just giving you money, when all you really want to do is not start a business, but to make something of value. So I feel like I have said when I've worked on investing, I have said things that might not be completely sincere in saying, you know, I'd like to get your money back, or this might make some money back, when I'm not entirely sure that that's going to happen. But I like to I like to make sure there's something that the person who invests in will feel that he or she has gotten back doing. I don't know, that's just been my view. Sam has also been producing, so I don't know what your opinion is.
I mean, I think we try to be as straightforward as possible and say, you know, we're going to do as much as we can to make back the money that you invest in this. But I guess so far we've worked with investors where we have close relationships with them and know that they do value somebody being a part of the process, and certainly hope to see their money back, but that's not the only reason they're in it.
I've dabbled, well, I've been a professional photographer for over 30 years, and I'm so partial to film.
Yeah.
And the look that you commented on, that you get from film. But I was wondering if film is still readily available because of the switch massively to digital.
Personally, I haven't seen any of the costs for film changing, so it has been available, definitely in my experience.
Yeah, Kodak's still in business.
Kodak.
Barely.
Yeah, actually, they've been quite generous. In my second film, Kodak donated a lot of film stock. I think because they want younger filmmakers to still be using film and to believe in film. So you can end up getting some good deals that way.
Yeah, historically Kodak has been very friendly to filmmakers, and I think continues to be so. And they used to be a sponsor of this festival, but they really are falling on hard times. Okay. Next question, Tom.
Thanks for letting me know what a turnaround means. And the next thing I'd really like to know is, what is a producer and what does a producer do? Charlie, you just produced Synecdoche. Could you explain?
I'm more of like a pretend producer.
I'd like to know what one is supposed to do. I've just never known. Can you tell me?
It's a good question, and Michael wants to field that one.
I've worked with a few different kinds of producers. There are some producers who are basically out there beating the drums for money. There are others who have relationships with the studios because of their successes, and so the studios give them a pile of money for development, and out of that they then can buy novels or magazine articles, and at a certain budget level can hire writers to develop those scripts, and then they present those scripts to the studios and then work with the studios on whether or not they can get them made or not. There are some people who get called a producer because they are the manager of a movie star, and without the movie star, the movie's not going to get made, and they include themselves in the credits as producer. There are people called line producers, although that title is disappearing, who are essentially the people who are on the set every day, handling more than the nuts and bolts of production, but are the general pattern of the film compared to the Eisenhower of the movie. Eisenhower is not a field commander, and Patton is out with the 7th Army and going directly into battle. The Motion Picture Academy has limited the number of people who can call themselves a producer, because there were at a time, some movie credits, if you go look at credits, you see 7, 8 producers, executive producer, and the studios want now 3 people only to be able to go up and pick up the award. And some producers feel that, some producers feel that that's actually not fair, and it misrepresents what contributions people make. So that if someone has actually financed the film because he liked the script, read the script, gave notes on the script, but was otherwise not that involved in production, is he any less of a producer than the person, someone else who has another bureaucratic function within the process? But there's really no one single kind of producer.
Yeah, there's no real depth. In the independent world, the producer is somewhat different than the producer in the studio world.
Some are brilliant with story and really understand what a script needs to work all the way. Others have more amorphous gifts that are at the same time still essential to getting the movie right. They're not the enemy.
No. And in television, the titles are completely different. I mean, in motion pictures, the title producer is what matters. In television, it's the title executive producer that matters. Okay, any other questions? Because if not, we're kind of approaching the end of our time. I want to make sure, yeah.
I think they're all doing a great job with being creative people in our country and in the industry, and I think you need a boost to keep on doing what you're doing because we do appreciate it.
And I'm sure a number of our panelists are seeking investors for their current projects. I don't know how those Social Security checks are doing, but anyhow, we want to thank you for taking time out of your morning to do this. I want to encourage you to see all 3 films today, starting at noon with Isaac Chung film, which I will ask him once again to tell me how to pronounce. Monterangabo. You should make sure you see the film. It's beautiful. Thank you very much.